I'm Morgan Reynolds, 35 years old, standing in my parents' backyard, watching my sister Natalie gather everyone for some grand announcement. That familiar knot twists in my stomach. Her smug smile says it all. 20 years of rivalry, and she still knows how to cut deep. What she doesn't know, what no one knows, is that while she's preparing to publicly humiliate me, I've got the keys to her dream lakefront home tucked inside my pocket. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about giving someone a lesson they'll never forget. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my sister's cruelty, take a second to drop a comment. Have you ever dealt with a toxic family member? And hit that subscribe button if you know how complicated siblings can be. Growing up the younger sister to Natalie Reynolds was like living in a permanent shadow. From the day I was born, life felt like a competition I never agreed to enter. Natalie's 2 years older, and for as long as I can remember, she's been determined to outshine me. Our childhood in suburban Connecticut was comfortable but modest. Dad worked as an engineer. Mom was an elementary school teacher. They raised us with solid middle-class values: work hard, save money, be kind. Simple truths. But somehow, Natalie and I absorbed those lessons in completely different ways. I was the planner, the saver, the kid who turned babysitting cash into a college fund. My room was organized, my grades were solid, and I had a 5-year plan before I'd even finished freshman year. Natalie, she had champagne tastes before she could legally drink. Designer labels, fancy trips, constant praise. Where I saw value in hard work, she chased attention and appearances. She wasn't malicious back then, not exactly, just deeply insecure, and always in need of validation. I'll never forget 4th grade. I spent weeks building a terrarium for my science project, handmade, ecosystems, labeled layers, the whole thing. My teacher called it college-level work. At parent night, I overheard Natalie telling her friends she'd done the hard parts because I didn't understand the science. I was crushed. But I stayed quiet. That became our pattern. She'd take, I'd retreat. By high school, it was routine. She'd diminish my achievements, or worse, claim them as her own. When I got into Cornell on a partial scholarship, she told relatives she helped coach me through the application. When I graduated with honors in business, she spun it like I was just following her footsteps, even though she'd dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Our parents, bless them, never truly saw the pattern. Dad gently urged me not to be so sensitive. Mom said, Natalie just expresses herself differently. They loved us both, but deep down, I think it was easier for them to appease Natalie than to confront the damage she caused. After college, I started building a business from scratch: sustainable home goods, ethically sourced. I poured 16-hour days into it, surviving on instant noodles in a studio apartment. Meanwhile, Natalie floated from job to job, quitting whenever it got too hard or beneath her talents. Then my business took off. By year 3, I had 10 employees. By year 5, I was featured in Entrepreneur Magazine's 30 Under 30 list. Suddenly, Natalie was my biggest supporter, telling everyone she'd always believed in me and that she'd given me the confidence to succeed. At family gatherings, she played the role of unofficial advisor. Meanwhile, she rented luxury apartments she couldn't afford, leased BMWs every 2 years. I lived modestly in a quiet townhouse and drove my Honda into the ground. I wasn't broke, I was building something real. She assumed I was just bad with money. 3 years ago, during a family trip to Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, Natalie fell in love with a lakefront property, 5 bedrooms, panoramic views, private dock, listed at $1.2 million. Way out of her league, but she obsessed over it all week. Photos, Pinterest boards, dreams of family holidays. It became her someday house. But 6 months ago, my business hit a rough patch. A major supplier went bankrupt, and an algorithm change on a major marketplace slashed my visibility. It was a perfect storm, temporary, but devastating. I took out a short-term business loan. Cash flow tanked. Somehow, Natalie found out, probably from snooping once I caught her rifling through my mail during a visit. I brushed it off. I shouldn't have. Then, by coincidence, that lakefront house came back on the market. Divorce sale. Asking price, $950,000. Still steep, but way under value. And suddenly, an idea took hold. Was it petty? Maybe. Risky? Definitely. But something in me said do it. I ran the numbers, consulted my financial advisor, and took the plunge. Liquidated a big chunk of my emergency savings and investments. Set up an LLC to keep my name off the paperwork. Made an all-cash offer. The closing was scheduled for Saturday morning, same day as the family reunion. Was I buying a house just to teach my sister a lesson? Or was this about finally standing up for myself? That quiet voice of doubt was still there. Was I becoming what I resented in Natalie, someone who uses money to control? Maybe, but I also knew this. Enough was enough. I won't change a single beat of this story, but I will tell it like a heartbeat. The Reynolds family reunion was a sacred tradition. Every summer, my parents' backyard overflowed with folding chairs, smoke from Dad's grill, and more relatives than I could count. Normally, I looked forward to it, a rare chance to connect with cousins who actually respected my work. But this year, my stomach twisted the second I pulled into the driveway. I had no intention of discussing my business struggles. The problems were real but manageable. I'd laid off 3 employees temporarily and scaled back operations to rebuild. Anyone with an ounce of business sense would have seen it as a temporary hiccup. Natalie, however, didn't operate on logic. She operated on spectacle. I checked my phone. No update from the realtor yet. I grabbed the homemade appetizers and took a deep breath. Finally made it. Mom called out, pulling me into a tight hug. She smelled like sunscreen and perfume, comfort and chaos all in one. Even Jenna came from Seattle this year. She beamed, guiding me toward the party. The backyard looked like a 4th of July catalog. Balloons, paper plates, clusters of aunts and uncles circling the food table. "Where's Natalie?" I asked, casually, placing the appetizers down. Mom's smile dimmed. "Inside, I think. With Aunt Patricia. Says she's got some kind of big announcement later." And there it was, the first warning bell. I wove through the crowd, exchanging hugs and small talk. Cousin Tyler asked for internship advice for his daughter. Uncle George proudly showed me photos of his new bamboo flooring. My catalog had inspired him. Aunt Maureen wanted Etsy tips for her knitting. Normally, these moments grounded me. Today, I felt detached, watching everything like a guest at my own life. I finally spotted Natalie near the drinks table, whispering with Cousin Rachel and Aunt Patricia. When she noticed me, her smile was too bright, too wide. She whispered something, and both women turned to look at me with soft pity. "Don't let her get to you," came a voice from behind. I turned to find Emma, my cousin and one of the few people I'd trusted with the full truth. "She's got a flair for drama," she said, handing me a glass of wine. "Whatever this is, it's not about you. It's about her." I sighed, grateful for her steady presence. "Do you ever wonder," I said, "why she's still like this? We're in our 30s. Isn't sibling rivalry supposed to fade by now?" Emma snorted. "In functional families, maybe, but Natalie built her whole identity around outshining you. The fact that you're the real deal while she's still pretending, that's unbearable for her." Dad's booming voice called everyone to the tables for lunch. Of course, I was seated directly across from Natalie. Classic mom, always assigning seats like she's casting a drama. Natalie was in full performance mode. Weekend in the Hamptons. Vague mention of a wealthy friend. A designer dress with the security tag still faintly visible. When I sat down, she practically purred, "Morgan, I was just telling everyone about this incredible real estate opportunity I'm considering. Don't you think property's the smartest investment these days?" I kept my tone neutral. "If you know what you're doing." She leaned in, faux whispering, "Well, I've been studying financial stability. Some businesses just aren't built to survive economic downturns, you know." I took a slow sip of wine. The dig was obvious, but I gave her nothing. Still, the tension at the table grew thicker. Cousin Derek asked how work was going to casually. Aunt Patricia offered to connect me with someone hiring administrative assistants. By dessert, I was exhausted. I excused myself to the bathroom, desperate for space. Alone, I checked my phone. One new message. "Paperwork ready for final. Signatures tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Congratulations on your new lake house." The calm that washed over me was instant. Whatever Natalie had planned, I had certainty in my corner. I returned to the yard with quiet resolve. Uncle Robert stood near the dessert table, slicing into Mom's blueberry pie. His presence always steadied me. "Your sister's on a mission," he said with a knowing glance. "She always is," I replied, grabbing a brownie. He nodded. "But you know what I've learned in 40 years of marriage? People who need to tear others down are usually standing on shaky ground." Before I could answer, metal clinked against glass. Natalie stood at the head of the table, beaming like she'd just won an Oscar. "Everyone, may I have your attention? I have something important to share." The backyard fell silent. What came next would change everything. Natalie raised her glass with faux sincerity. "First, I want to thank Mom and Dad for hosting another beautiful reunion. Family means everything to me, which is why, when one of us is struggling, it's important we come together." I knew what was coming, but that didn't make it hurt any less. She looked right at me with a twisted mix of sympathy and smugness. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Because Morgan needs our support right now." My stomach dropped. "It breaks my heart to tell you all this," she continued, voice trembling with performance-ready emotion. "But Morgan's business has failed. She's filed for bankruptcy." Gasps, murmurs, every eye in the yard turned toward me. "She's lost everything, her inventory, her warehouse, her accounts. The bank is reviewing her personal assets." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Morgan, honey, is this true?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Natalie was already stepping in again. She was too ashamed to tell anyone. "But we're family, and there's no room for secrets here." It was a masterclass in manipulation, dismissing a decade of work as a little business, then posing as the heroic sister swooping in to save me. "I've already offered Morgan a room at my place," Natalie continued. "I've reached out to some contacts, job leads, support. Maybe it'll be good for her to experience working for someone else for a change." That last part cut deepest, because 3 years ago, when she'd been fired from yet another job, I had offered her a role at my company. She laughed. I could never work for my little sister. Now, here she was, painting herself as my savior. Dad stood up, face flushed. "Morgan, why are we just hearing about this now?" The truth was simple. There was no bankruptcy. Yes, I'd had a cash flow issue, but we were already recovering. Stronger supplier, better marketing. My team had stepped up. We were surviving. But how could I explain all that without sounding like I was just trying to save face? I took a breath. "Thank you for your concern," I said, locking eyes with Natalie. "But Natalie doesn't have all the facts. My business is restructuring, not bankrupt." She laughed, light and condescending. "Oh, Morgan, you don't have to pretend. I saw the Chapter 11 paperwork." That detailed Chapter 11 instead of 7 was deliberate. Just enough specificity to sound credible. The relatives began to shift, some nodding slowly. Believing her, I kept my voice steady. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." She waved it off. "We're all family here. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Failure happens." The irony, she used to criticize me for growing too slowly. Now she was claiming she warned me against expanding too fast. I couldn't take it anymore. I quietly excused myself and walked back toward the house. Inside the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, heart pounding. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Want me to accidentally spill wine on her dress?" I smiled. Then another message came in from my real estate agent. "Final contract attached. See you at 9 a.m. Uncle Robert appeared in the doorway. His eyes were soft with understanding. "Your sister's quite the performer," he said, closing the door behind him. "She certainly knows how to put on a show," I replied, sliding my phone into my pocket. He took a seat at the table. "You know, I've watched you too since you were little. Natalie's the peacock, all flash and feathers. But you, Morgan, you're the owl. Quiet, sharp, smarter than most people realize." I gave a weak smile, not smart enough to avoid this ambush. "I don't believe for a second you're bankrupt. But even if you were so, what do you think anyone here would love you less?" Something about his words cracked through my defenses. For years, I defined myself as everything Natalie wasn't. Where she was impulsive, I was strategic. Where she craved attention, I preferred quiet wins. But had I ever allowed myself to just be? He reached for my hand. "You don't need to prove anything." I nodded, holding back tears. "Thank you. So, what's your plan?" He asked with a smile that knew the answer. I looked down at my phone. "It happens tomorrow." He chuckled. "Good. Let's get back out there before your mother organizes a GoFundMe for your bankruptcy." We stepped back outside, just as Natalie was telling someone that she was going to help me rebuild my life from scratch. I took my seat quietly, ate a slice of pie, and waited for tomorrow. The rest of the reunion was surreal. What should have been an afternoon of laughter and connection had turned into some kind of intervention. For a bankruptcy that didn't exist. Suddenly, I was the charity case of the Reynolds family. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years offered help. Aunt Diane slipped me a brochure for a multi-level marketing company. My neighbor's daughter makes 6 figures selling essential oils. Cousin Greg Hood failed at 3 businesses offered to look over my finances. The irony was thick enough to drown in. Uncle Stephen launched into a slow, overly detailed explanation of how unemployment benefits worked. I nodded politely while biting the inside of my cheek. And Natalie, she floated around the yard like the heroine of her own movie, 1 part Florence Nightingale, 1 part Wall Street guru. When she wasn't offering me support, she was basking in sympathetic attention from every corner of the party. "Morgan, I've been thinking about your wardrobe," she said loudly at one point, while a few aunts looked on. "When you move in with me, we can go through my closet. I've got some professional outfits that would be perfect for job interviews." She said it sweetly, with a smile. But the humiliation was razor sharp. My parents seemed unsure what to believe. Mom kept bringing me extra servings of food, as if being bankrupt had left me underfed. Dad awkwardly mentioned that his retirement fund was in good shape if I needed help. Their concern felt real, but so did the sting of how quickly they'd accepted Natalie's version of things. By evening, the tiki torches flickered on. I found myself on the old wooden swing at the edge of the yard, the same one I'd retreated to as a kid whenever Natalie's teasing got too cruel. Some patterns never change. "Mind if I join you?" Emma asked, 2 glasses of wine in hand. I scooted over. She settled beside me with a sigh and handed me one. "Remember that Christmas when Natalie told everyone you still wet the bed?" she asked. I groaned. I was 9, and the adults checked my sheets every morning after that. Emma smirked. "And the next summer, she built that secret fort in the woods and got covered in poison ivy because someone casually mentioned that plants with 3 leaves were dangerous." I smiled. She itched for a week. Emma clinked her glass against mine. "You've always played the long game, Morgan. That's why I'm not worried about you." Just then, my phone buzzed. Natalie's name. I declined the call. But she didn't give up. Moments later, she was making her way toward us across the lawn, determination in every step. "Incoming drama at 3 o'clock, Emma whispered, squeezing my arm before making a quick exit. Natalie plopped onto the swing beside me, her designer dress comically out of place on the weathered wood. "You're avoiding me," she said, her voice coated in mock hurt. "Can you blame me?" She crossed her legs, letting out a sigh. "Don't be so sensitive, Morgan. I was just being honest with the family. They deserve to know." I turned to face her. "Know what? That you went through my private papers, misread what you saw, and decided to announce it without ever asking me first." Her eyes narrowed. "I saw the bankruptcy forms." "You saw a contingency plan my lawyer prepared," I said evenly. "They were never filed. My business had a setback. Not a collapse." She faltered for just a moment. "Well, the family needed to know either way. I'm just trying to help." I looked at her. Really looked. "Were you? Or were you enjoying the attention playing the role of generous big sister while positioning me as the failure?" She didn't answer. I softened my voice. "Natalie, this has to stop. This pattern. It's been our story since we were kids, and I've let it continue by saying nothing. But that ends today." She stared out at the lake. "You've always been the perfect one, Morgan. The smart one. The one who actually made something of herself. Do you have any idea what it's like to live in your shadow?" That caught me off guard. "My shadow," I said. "You've spent years claiming credit for my success, undermining me, dismissing what I've built as some little business. Meanwhile, you're living beyond your means and pretending it's all fine." "That's not true," she whispered, "isn't it? Yesterday, you could have pulled me aside and asked about those papers. Instead, you made it a spectacle." "Why?" She didn't respond. I took a deep breath. "I think it's because you've built your identity around being more successful than me. And when you thought I'd failed, you saw your chance." Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not fair. You make it all look so easy." "It's not," I said gently. "I struggle all the time, but I don't compare my worth to yours. I don't need to." I handed her a tissue. "And for the record, buying that house. It was a huge financial risk. I cashed out savings and investments. I did it because I was tired of this narrative, tired of always being the quiet one." A small, genuine laugh escaped her. "That's actually kind of badass." I smiled. "I prefer to call it a lesson in boundaries." She looked around at the porch, the lake, So what now? You bought a house just to prove a point. Am I cut off for good? That depends on you, I said. I didn't buy this house to shut you out. I bought it because something had to change. I stood, walking to the railing. I miss my sister. Not the one who competes with me. The one who made me laugh at breakfast and taught me how to French braid. When I turned back, her expression had softened real vulnerability for the first time in years. I miss her, too, she said. Then let's try something different, I said. Let's start fresh. Total honesty. Right now. I looked her in the eye. Why did you really make that announcement at the reunion? Natalie's shoulders slumped. As she clutched her purse in her lap, her voice dropped to a whisper. Because I'm drowning, Morgan. My credit cards are maxed. I'm 3 months behind on my car payments. Work put me on performance review. My whole life feels like it's slipping. She inhaled shakily, and then I found those documents and thought, finally, something I'm doing better than you, something that makes me look like the successful one for once. The honesty in her words stunned me. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. She shook her head. You don't get it. I'm the older sister. I'm supposed to have it figured out. But you're the one with the business, the success, the life. I'm still folding sweaters at 37. I sat down beside her again. Natalie, success isn't a scoreboard. And it's not just about money or titles. You've got incredible people skills. You light up a room. But you waste it chasing appearances. She looked genuinely surprised. You think I'm good at something? I know you are, I said simply. But you've spent so long trying to one-up me, you've forgotten who you really are. She was quiet for a while. Then, softly, you work 70-hour weeks. You haven't taken a vacation in years. I always thought you were just winning, but maybe you're just tired too. I let out a small laugh. You're not wrong. She glanced around the porch. So, I don't suppose you'd ever let me visit this place. I hesitated for a moment. Then, more than visit, but on 3 conditions. Her eyebrows lifted. First, I said, no more public humiliation. No more taking credit for things you didn't do. Second, we start being honest with each other and ourselves. Finances, fears, all of it. And third, I looked at her directly. You tell the family the truth about what happened at the reunion. She winced. They'll think I'm awful. No, I said gently. They'll think you made a mistake and owned it. That's something they'll respect. She considered it, then slowly nodded. Okay, deal. And in return, she asked. I get to use the lake house. More than that, I said. You get a chance to be my sister again, not my rival. And I'll help you sort out your finances if you want. No judgment. She looked at me for a long moment, then reached out not for a handshake, but a hug. Deal, she whispered against my shoulder. I picked up the keys and placed them in her hand. Why don't you take a look around? I'll make more coffee. Natalie stepped inside, her awe written on her face as she explored each room. While she wandered the house, I pulled out my phone and called our parents. It was time the truth came out from both of us. 2 weeks later, we hosted a family gathering at the lake house. The invitation, signed by both of us, had surprised everyone. Some came out of curiosity, others out of concern. When Mom and Dad arrived, their eyes widened. Morgan, this is stunning, Mom whispered, walking straight to the windows. I bought it the morning after the reunion, I explained. Dad ran his fingers along the built-in bookshelves. Doesn't look like something someone bankrupt could afford, he muttered. About that, I began. But Natalie entered, just then, carrying a tray of homemade appetizers. That alone raised eyebrows. She was dressed stylishly, but without the usual flash. No sunglasses, no statement jewelry, just Natalie. She clinked a glass. I asked you all here because I owe you one, especially Morgan, an apology. The room went still. At the reunion, I told you Morgan had filed for bankruptcy. That was untrue. I jumped to conclusions after finding some legal documents, contingency forms. And I chose to share that information publicly without ever asking her. That was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The truth is, Morgan's business had a temporary challenge, but she was already fixing it. In fact, she gestured to the house. She bought this property the very next morning. She looked directly at me, her voice softening. I've spent too long comparing myself to my sister. But I'm done with that. I want to be better, and Morgan's shown me how. I stepped beside her. This house isn't about revenge, I told the room. It's about a new start. For our family, Emma raised her champagne glass. About damn time. Laughter broke the tension. Relatives began to gather around, some with apologies, others with warm hugs. Uncle Robert pulled me aside and whispered, "Finally." In the months that followed, everything began to shift. It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard. Natalie still slipped into competitiveness now and then. I still withdrew when things got hard, but we were learning. Together, she found a new job, retail management, one that fit her strengths. I helped her build a real budget, and she slowly began climbing out of debt. Her style didn't disappear, but her need to impress did. As for my business, it bounced back stronger than ever. The new supplier was even better than the last, and our pivoted marketing strategy led to our most profitable quarter yet. The lake house became what I'd hoped, a place for healing. My parents celebrated their 40th anniversary there. Cousins brought their kids for weekends. Natalie and I started hosting sister weekends, coffee, lake swims, honesty. One night, we sat together on the dock, watching the sunset paint the lake gold. "You know," she said, "you could have used this house to cut me out forever." I smiled. "I thought about it." She laughed. "Buying it was a power move. I'll give you that. I did it out of anger. But also, I think I just wanted it to end. The pattern, the rivalry." "Well," she said, leaning back on her hands, "it worked. Nothing pops a superiority bubble like watching your bankrupt sister buy your dream house." We both laughed. And then she grew quiet. "You were right, you know. Comparing myself to you, it was exhausting, and it never actually made me happy." I nodded. "It never does." The sun dipped behind the trees. Water lapped gently against the dock. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just winning, I was free. Sometimes, the moment meant to break you becomes the one that sets you free. Sometimes, the house meant to prove a point ends up becoming a home. And sometimes, the sister who tried to humiliate you becomes the one you laugh with until midnight, on the porch swing. Because the truth is, healing doesn't begin with revenge. It begins with boundaries, with honesty, with one brave decision to stop the cycle. Thanks for being part of this story. If you've ever had a turning point in a difficult relationship, share it in the comments. And if this story resonated, give it a like and hit subscribe. And remember, sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we need to forgive the hardest, but only after we've found the strength to stand on our own.